Olivia Benson looked up at the massive glass and metal structure of the Galactic Academy of Defense. The building reached so high that its top floors disappeared into the clouds. She took a deep breath, adjusted her simple gray uniform, and walked through the entrance doors. As the first human to be accepted into the Academy in 50 years, Olivia felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Earth had only recently joined the Galactic Coalition after decades of isolation. Many of the older alien races still viewed humans with suspicion. The entrance hall buzzed with activity. Students from dozens of worlds moved about with purpose. Tall, blue-skinned Arcturians discussed complex equations in the corner. A group of four-armed Proxima cadets practiced combat moves with frightening speed. Olivia noticed how many of them stopped their conversations to stare as she passed. "Human," she heard someone whisper. "So fragile?" another voice added. Olivia kept her eyes forward and her back straight. The letter of acceptance she'd received had directed her to report to the placement committee on her first day. She found the room easily enough. A small chamber with a circular table at its center. 3 Academy officials waited for her. An Arcturian woman with stern features sat in the middle. She wore the silver uniform of the Academy Dean. On either side of her sat 2 representatives from Vega, their scaled skin shimmering under the bright lights. "Olivia Benson of Earth," the Dean said, her voice crisp and formal. "I am Dean Cora. These are Professors Zinn and Tal. We will evaluate your capabilities and assign you to an appropriate squad." Olivia nodded. "Thank you for the opportunity." "Let's begin," Dean Cora said, pressing a button on the table. The next 4 hours were the most intense testing Olivia had ever experienced. First came the physical assessments. She lifted weights, ran distances, and demonstrated combat skills against training bots. Next, she solved strategic problems and tactical simulations. Finally, they tested her for psionic abilities, placing strange devices against her temples and asking her to move objects with her mind. When the testing finished, the 3 officials huddled together, speaking in low voices. Olivia stood at attention, trying to ignore the burning in her muscles and the sweat on her brow. Dean Cora finally looked up from her datapad. Her expression told Olivia everything she needed to know. "Ms. Benson," the Dean began, "your strategic thinking scores are impressive. Among the top percentile of this year's class." Olivia allowed herself a small smile. "However," Dean Cora continued, "your physical capabilities measure at barely 1/4 that of our average Proximan student. And your psionic abilities are virtually non-existent." "I understand, ma'am," Olivia said. "Humans are still developing in those areas." Professor Zinn made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Developing? Your species may never reach the baseline standards of the Academy." Dean Cora held up a hand, silencing her colleague. "Unfortunately, Ms. Benson, we must assign you to Squad Omega." Olivia's heart sank. She had researched the Academy thoroughly before applying. Squad Omega was the designation for students considered least likely to succeed. "It's last place," Professor Tull added, not bothering to hide the pity in his voice. "We suggest you consider returning to Earth before classes begin. It would save you considerable discomfort." Olivia straightened her shoulders. "I'll stay." Dean Cora's eyebrows raised slightly. "As you wish. Report to Dormitory Complex 12, Section E tomorrow morning. Your squad mates will meet you there." Olivia left the room with her head high. Even as her stomach twisted with disappointment, the following morning, Olivia made her way to Dormitory Complex 12. While the main Academy buildings gleamed with polished metal and crystal, Complex 12 stood apart from the others, its paint peeling and windows cloudy with age. Section E was at the very end of a long corridor. When Olivia pushed open the door, she found a common room with worn furniture and 3 people who looked up at her entrance. "You must be the human," said a young man with red-tinted skin who lounged on a couch. "I'm Kyle Patterson. Half Martian, half trouble, according to the instructors." He smirked, but Olivia noticed it didn't reach his eyes. A pale woman with almost translucent skin sat in the corner, a datapad clutched tightly in her hands. She glanced up briefly before looking down again. That's Diane Fletcher, Kyle explained, from Europa. Brilliant tactician, but she doesn't talk much during simulations, or ever, really. Diane gave a small nod, still not making eye contact. The third person was enormous, easily 7 feet tall with broad shoulders and thick limbs. His skin had an orange-gray tint common to people from Titan. Zachary Williams, the big man said, his voice surprisingly soft. I'm strong but stupid, or so they tell me. Don't sell yourself short, Zach, Kyle said. You're also clumsy. Zachary shrugged good-naturedly. Olivia set her bag down. I'm Olivia Benson, from Earth. We know, Kyle said. They sent us the human. We're officially the Academy's garbage disposal. He stood up and stretched. No offense. We all ended up here for a reason. I don't follow orders well. Diane freezes under pressure. Zach can't pass a written test to save his life. And I'm physically weak with no psionic ability, Olivia finished for him. At least you're honest, Kyle said. Your bed's through there. We start training exercises tomorrow at 0600. Try not to embarrass us too much. Olivia unpacked her few belongings in the small room that would be her home. Through the thin walls, she could hear Kyle and Zachary talking. How long do you think she'd last? Zachary asked. 1 week, Kyle replied. Maybe 2 if she's stubborn. Olivia sat on her bed and pulled out her data pad. She began researching her new squad mates, digging into their backgrounds and academy test results. Something didn't add up. Each of them had shown flashes of exceptional ability before being relegated to squad. Omega. As lights out was called and the dormitory went dark, Olivia continued working by the dim light of her pad. There was more to her teammates than the academy recognized. And if they were going to survive here, she needed to figure out what it was. In the darkness of her new room, far from Earth and surrounded by aliens who expected her to fail, Olivia made a promise to herself. Squad Omega wouldn't be last place for long. The first 3 weeks at the Galactic Academy were brutal for Squad Omega. Every morning began with combat training in the central arena, where squads faced off against each other in simulated battles. Olivia and her teammates lost every single match. Pathetic, sneered Commander Harris, the combat instructor, as Squad Omega picked themselves up after their latest defeat. Squad Alpha completed the objective in 3 minutes. Your squad couldn't even make it past the first barrier. Squad Alpha, led by a tall Proximan named Vex, stood at attention on the other side of the arena. Their matching uniforms were still perfectly clean, while Squad Omega's were torn and dirty. We need more time to work together, Olivia tried to explain. Commander Harris laughed. Time won't fix what's broken. Omega Squad hasn't advanced beyond last place in 15 years. The designation exists to motivate the rest of the academy by showing them what failure looks like. The rest of the day wasn't much better. In engineering class, Kyle's attempt to improve a standard shield generator ended with smoke filling the classroom. In tactical studies, Diane froze when called upon, unable to speak as the entire class stared at her. And in advanced physics, Zachary accidentally broke 3 lab stations with his strength. By evening, when they returned to their rundown dormitory, everyone was quiet and discouraged. Maybe they're right about us, Zachary said as he carefully lowered himself onto a chair that seemed too small for his large frame. Maybe we don't belong here. Olivia didn't answer. She had spent every night reviewing their performance data, studying recordings of their training sessions, and researching her teammates' backgrounds. Tonight, she finally had something to share. I need to show you all something, she said, pulling out her data pad and connecting it to the common room display. I've been analyzing our performances. Kyle rolled his eyes. Great, more evidence of how terrible we are. Actually, the opposite, Olivia said. She pulled up several video clips and data charts. Look at this. Each of you has exceptional abilities that the standard academy assessments completely miss. She pointed to footage of Kyle in engineering class. Kyle, when you're told exactly how to build something according to regulations, you fail. But when you improvised repairs during the emergency systems test last week, you solved the problem in half the time of anyone else. Kyle looked surprised. They still gave me a failing grade. Because you didn't follow protocol, Olivia explained. But your approach was actually more efficient, she turned to Diane. And Diane, you haven't spoken once during tactical simulations, but I noticed you've been typing notes the entire time. Diane looked down, embarrassed. Can I see those notes? Olivia asked gently. After a moment's hesitation, Diane handed over her datapad. Olivia displayed its contents on the main screen. The others gasped. The pad contained detailed tactical analyses of every simulation they had run, with alternative strategies that might have worked better. This is brilliant, Kyle said, scrolling through the notes. Why didn't you share this during the exercises? Diane's voice was barely above a whisper. I can't talk when everyone is watching me, but you can type while they're watching? Olivia asked. Diane nodded. And Zachary, Olivia continued, turning to the big man. The Academy thinks you're not intelligent because you score poorly on written tests. But I noticed something interesting during physical training. You always know where an attack is coming from before it happens. Zachary shrugged. I just feel it. The way people move, the air changes, the floor vibrates. It's obvious. It's not obvious to anyone else, Olivia said. You process information through physical senses in a way the Academy's verbal tests can't measure. For the first time since she'd arrived, Olivia saw hope in her teammates' eyes. So what? Zachary finally asked. The instructors don't care. They've already decided we're failures. They will care, Olivia said, pulling out a portable holoprojector. Because we're going to change how we play the game. She activated the projector, displaying a 3D model of an upcoming training exercise. The quantum breach simulation is happening in 2 weeks, she explained. It's the most difficult exercise at the Academy, with a 98% failure rate. Teams have to defend a space station against attack while evacuating civilians. And you want us to volunteer for this? Kyle asked incredulously. We can't even win a basic combat simulation. That's because we're playing by their rules, Olivia said. The system is designed to measure talents that align with traditional military approaches, but we're not traditional. We're specialized. She adjusted the hologram, highlighting different sections of the simulated space station. If we approach this differently, using our actual strengths instead of trying to fit the Academy's mold, I think we can succeed. How? Diane asked, her voice still quiet but steadier than before. Olivia smiled. Diane, what if you didn't have to speak during the simulation? What if you could communicate entirely through text? I could do that, Diane said. And Kyle, what if instead of following standard procedures, you were free to modify the defense systems however you want? Kyle's eyes lit up. Seriously? I have at least a dozen ideas they've rejected for being non-regulation. Zachary, what if we connected you to the station's sensor arrays? With your ability to process physical information, you could detect attacks before they register on standard equipment. Zachary nodded slowly. I could do that. And what will you do? Kyle asked Olivia. I'll be the connector, she explained. Humans may not be as strong or psionically gifted as other species, but we're adaptable. I'll coordinate between all of you, translating your different communication styles and making sure we work as a unit. For the first time, Squad Omega began to feel like a real team. They spent the rest of the evening planning their approach to the quantum breach simulation. The next morning, Olivia sought out Dean Russell, the newest and most progressive instructor at the Academy. Unlike the other teachers, Dean Russell had shown occasional interest in Squad Omega's progress. Dean Russell, Olivia said, catching up to her after class. Squad Omega would like to participate in the quantum breach simulation. The dean looked surprised. That exercise is typically reserved for advanced squads. Your team hasn't qualified for any advanced training. We'd like the chance to prove ourselves, Olivia insisted. Academy regulations state that any squad can volunteer for special exercises if approved by a supervising instructor. Dean Russell studied Olivia for a long moment. You understand the difficulty level? Most top squads fail this simulation. We understand, Olivia said confidently. After a pause, Dean Russell nodded. Your request is approved, Ms. Benson, though. I question your team's readiness for such an advanced challenge. As Olivia walked back to her dormitory, a message appeared on her datapad. It was from Diane. Did she say yes? Olivia typed back, "Yes, get ready. We have a lot of work to do." News that Squad Omega had volunteered for the quantum breach simulation spread quickly through the academy. Most students found it amusing. Some thought it was sad. No one believed they had any chance of success. I heard the human convinced Dean. "Russell to let them try," one Arcturian cadet said loudly as Olivia passed in the hallway. "They'll be lucky if they last 5 minutes," Olivia ignored the comments. For the next 2 weeks, Squad Omega devoted every spare moment to preparing for the simulation. They used their rundown dormitory common room as a planning center, covering the walls with diagrams and strategy notes. Kyle spent his time modifying standard defense equipment. He took apart regulation shield generators and rebuilt them with unusual configurations that violated Academy protocols but doubled their effectiveness. He also created small, drone-like devices that could move independently through the simulation space. "These can extend our reach," he explained to the others. "We can deploy them to areas we can't physically defend." Diane worked silently at her station, developing a custom communication system. Instead of using standard voice commands, she built a text-based interface that would allow her to rapidly send tactical instructions to the team. When she tested it with the others, her natural brilliance shone through without the anxiety that paralyzed her speech. "This is amazing," Olivia said. Reading Diane's detailed analysis of previous failed attempts at the simulation, "You've identified patterns no one else noticed." Diane smiled slightly. The first time Olivia had seen her do so, Zachary's training was the most unusual. While the Academy taught students to rely on sensor readings and data displays, Olivia had Zachary practice with his eyes closed, feeling vibrations through the floor and changes in air pressure. "The attacks will come from multiple directions," Olivia explained. "Standard sensors have a delay. But you can feel them coming before they register," Zachary nodded. "Like when you're in a forest and know a storm is coming before the first raindrop falls." For her part, Olivia studied everything she could about the simulation itself. She learned that the quantum breach scenario involved defending a space station against waves of attackers while evacuating civilian personnel. No squad had ever achieved both objectives, most focused on either evacuation or defense, sacrificing one for the other. The night before the simulation, Squad Omega gathered in their common room for a final review. "Remember, we're not trying to win the way other squads win," Olivia said. "We're playing to our strengths." "Which are pretty weird strengths," Kyle added with a small smile. "Weird but effective," Olivia corrected him. "Diane will coordinate from the central command node, communicating only through text. Kyle, you'll have freedom to modify the station systems as needed. Zachary, you'll be our early warning system and rapid response unit." "And you?" Zachary asked. "I'll be the connection between all of you," Olivia replied. "Translating, coordinating, adapting." They reviewed their plan one last time before trying to get some sleep. None of them slept well. The next morning, all participating squads gathered in the main simulation chamber. It was a vast room filled with holographic projectors and haptic feedback systems that could create a realistic environment for the exercise. Squad Alpha, led by Vex, stood at the front in perfectly pressed uniforms. 3 other top-ranked squads were also participating. And then there was Squad Omega. Standing slightly apart from the others, Commander Harris walked down the line, inspecting each team. When he reached Squad Omega, he frowned at their modified equipment. "What is this?" he demanded, pointing at Kyle's altered shield generator. "Sir, Academy regulations permit the use of modified equipment if it meets or exceeds standard specifications," Olivia said quickly. "And does it?" the commander asked skeptically. "It exceeds them by 127%, sir," Kyle answered, unable to keep the pride from his voice. Commander Harris looked like he wanted to object further, but moved on instead. "The quantum breach simulation is designed to test your limits," he announced to all the squads. "No team has ever achieved complete success. Your goal is to defend the station and evacuate all civilians. Most teams manage one or the other, never Both. He stepped onto a platform that rose above the floor. You will be scored on effectiveness, speed, and casualties. The simulation begins in 3 minutes. The squads took their positions at different entry points. As Squad Omega moved to their designated spot, the least favorable position, naturally Vex called out to them. "Try not to get in the way of real teams," he said with a smirk. Several cadets laughed. The chamber darkened, then light returned as the holographic environment formed around them. They now stood in what appeared to be a large space station. With curved corridors and multiple levels visible through transparent floors, a computerized voice spoke. "Simulation commencing. Warning, quantum breach detected, multiple hostiles. Approaching, civilian evacuation required." The other squads immediately broke into standard formation patterns, deploying shield barriers and establishing defensive perimeters. Squad Omega, however, took a completely different approach. Diane went directly to a small, isolated control room that Olivia had identified during their research. There, she connected her custom interface to the station's communication system. Instead of using the standard command setup, she created a private channel for their team only. Kyle began rapidly reconfiguring the station's defense systems, rerouting power and installing his modified shield generators at key points, but not the points most teams would defend. Zachary positioned himself at a junction where multiple corridors met, closed his eyes, and placed his hands on the floor. "Movement," he said softly into his communicator. "Sector 4, approaching fast." "More." In Sector 7, slower but heavier. On her datapad, Olivia saw Diane's first tactical assessment appear. They're coming in 2 waves. First wave is a distraction. Second is the main force. Standard defense patterns will fail. "Copy that," Olivia responded. She relayed the information to Kyle and Zachary, translating Diane's complex analysis into actionable instructions for each of them within minutes. The first attacks hit the station. Throughout the simulation chamber, holographic explosions and battle sounds created a chaotic environment. Squad Alpha and the other top teams engaged the attackers directly, following textbook defensive strategies. Squad Omega, meanwhile, appeared to be in disarray. They abandoned entire sections of the station that Academy Doctrine deemed critical. Their defensive line was irregular and constantly shifting. From the observation platform, Commander Harris watched with a mixture of confusion and disapproval. "What are they doing?" he asked Dean Russell, who had joined him to observe. "I'm not entirely sure," Dean Russell replied, studying the unusual pattern forming on the display screens. "But it looks intentional." As the simulation progressed, the other teams began to struggle against the overwhelming force of the attack. Their rigid formations, while initially effective, couldn't adapt to the changing battle conditions. Squad Omega, however, was just getting started. The first hour of the quantum breach simulation was chaos. Red warning lights flashed throughout the station as simulated attackers poured in from multiple entry points. Holographic civilians ran in panic, adding to the confusion from the observation deck. The Academy instructors watched the squads in action. Squad Alpha, as expected, performed admirably. Their defensive formations were textbook perfect, and they had secured 2 evacuation zones, but they were already showing signs of strain. "Squad Alpha's shield capacity down to 60%, reported an assistant. Commander Harris nodded. "They'll hold. What about the others?" "Squads Beta and Gamma are focusing entirely on evacuation. Squad Delta is purely defensive, and Squad Omega." The assistant paused, frowning at his screens. "I'm not sure what Squad Omega is doing." On the main display, Squad Omega's movements appeared erratic. They would defend a section vigorously, then abandon it entirely. They secured evacuation routes only to redirect them moments later. Their resource allocation defied all standard protocols. "They're falling apart, as expected," Commander Harris said with a dismissive wave. Dean Russell wasn't so sure. She studied the pattern of Squad Omega's movements more carefully. "I don't think so," she said slowly. "Look at their casualty count." The assistant checked his data. "That can't be right. 0 civilian casualties for Squad Omega?" Inside the simulation, Olivia ran down a corridor, guiding a group of holographic civilians toward an evacuation point. Her datapad buzzed with a message from Diane. Redirect to Sector 9. Attack force breaking through Sector 6 in approximately 2 minutes. Copy that, Olivia replied. She changed course, leading the civilians down a different path. Over her communicator she called, Kyle, we need cover in Sector 9. Already on it, Kyle's voice replied. Deploying modified shields now. Ahead of her, 3 of Kyle's drone devices zoomed around a corner. They positioned themselves at intervals along the corridor and activated, creating a shimmering energy barrier. Olivia guided the civilians through before the barrier sealed behind them. Just as they cleared the area, the wall in Sector 6 exploded inward as Diane had predicted. A wave of holographic attackers poured through, only to find an empty corridor. Meanwhile, Zachary was on the move. With his eyes half closed, he navigated through the station by feeling vibrations through the floors and walls. 12 hostiles moving through Sector 3, he reported. They think it's empty. It's a trap, Diane typed from her command center. Let them in, then seal both ends. Zachary waited until the attackers had fully entered the corridor, then activated Kyle's modified barriers at both ends, trapping them. At the 2-hour mark, something unexpected happened. The simulation intensified dramatically, with triple the number of attackers than in previous years. It caught all the squads by surprise. This is new, Commander Harris said, genuinely shocked. Who authorized this difficulty increase? No one had. The simulation was adapting, responding to the unexpected success of the teams. Squad Alpha's perfect formation began to crumble under the increased pressure. Their captain, Vex, shouted orders that became increasingly desperate. Reinforce the main shield. Abandon evacuation point 2. Focus all resources on defense. One by one, the other squads began to fail. Squad Beta lost their command center. Squad Gamma couldn't maintain their evacuation routes. Squad Delta's defenses were overwhelmed. Should we end the simulation? The assistant asked Commander Harris. No, Dean Russell interrupted. Look at Squad Omega. While the other teams faltered, Squad Omega seemed to become more effective as the chaos increased. Their fluid, adaptable approach allowed them to shift resources exactly where needed. Diane's messages to the team came faster, attack force dividing. Kyle, split shield coverage between Sectors 2 and 7, Zachary. Intercept the group in Sector 4, Olivia, new evacuation route mapped to your pad. They're not fighting according to Academy doctrine, Dean Russell observed. They're creating their own. Inside the simulation, Olivia had just reached the main evacuation point with her last group of civilians when the ceiling collapsed ahead of them. The path was blocked. Diane, we need a new route, she called into her communicator. The main path is cut off. There was no response. The communication system had been damaged. Olivia thought quickly. Without Diane's tactical guidance, they were vulnerable. Without Kyle's shields, they were exposed. Without Zachary's early warnings, they were blind. The team's strength came from working together. Everyone, fall back to Command Center B, she ordered. We need to regroup. Within minutes, all 4 members of Squad Omega had gathered in the small command room. The holographic battle raged around them, but for a moment, they had a reprieve. Communications are down, Olivia explained. We need a new way to coordinate. Kyle examined the damaged systems. I can reroute through secondary channels, but it will take time. We don't have time, Olivia said. She looked at her teammates, then made a decision. New plan, we stay together as a unit. What? Kyle looked shocked. That violates every tactical principle in the book. Exactly, Olivia smiled, and that's why it will work. The simulation is programmed to respond to standard tactics. By staying together, we become a single point of strength rather than divided targets. Zachary nodded slowly. I can sense everything around us better when we're together. And I can modify our defenses on the fly, Kyle added, warming to the idea. Diane, who had been silent as usual, typed on her pad and showed it to the others. Tactical probability of success, 68%. Higher than any other option. Then it's settled, Olivia said. We move as one unit. Diane guides our overall strategy. Kyle adapts our defenses as we go. Zachary senses incoming threats. I coordinate between you and make real-time decisions. They emerged from the command center as a tight-knit group. Kyle deployed shield generators around them in a bubble of protection. Diane continuously analyzed the battle through her pad, sending short text updates to the others. Zachary called out threats before they appeared. Olivia made quick decisions, guiding their movement through the chaos. They reached the first group of stranded civilians and gathered them within their protective bubble. Then the next group, and the next. On the observation deck, the instructors watched in amazement. "They're actually doing it," the assistant said in disbelief. "They're both defending and evacuating simultaneously." By the 3-hour mark, only 2 squads remained operational: Squad Alpha and probably Squad Omega. Vex and his team had abandoned evacuation entirely, focusing all their resources on defending the station's core. They held their position with grim determination, but they were slowly losing ground. Squad Omega, meanwhile, continued their unusual approach. Their protective bubble moved through the station like a living thing, expanding to gather civilians, contracting to navigate tight spaces, shifting its strength to meet attacks from different directions. "I've never seen anything like this," Commander Harris admitted reluctantly. At the 4-hour mark, Squad Alpha's defenses finally collapsed. Vex and his team fought valiantly to the end, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer number of attackers. Squad Omega stood alone. "Final evacuation group secured," Olivia announced to her team as they guided the last civilians to safety. "Now we defend the core until time expires." They moved to the central chamber of the station, the heart of its operations. There they made their final stand against wave after wave of attackers. When the simulation finally ended, silence filled the observation deck. Squad Omega had successfully evacuated all civilians and maintained the station's core integrity. A complete success, something no squad had ever achieved before. The holographic environment of the space station faded away, leaving Squad Omega standing in the center of the simulation chamber. For a moment, nobody spoke. The 4 teammates looked at each other in disbelief, their faces tired but triumphant. We just ... Double Quo began. "Yes," Olivia confirmed, "we did it." From the observation deck, Commander Harris stared at the final performance statistics displayed on his screen. He shook his head in disbelief. "This must be a system error," he insisted. "Squad Omega couldn't possibly have succeeded. We're even." "Squad Alpha failed." Dean Russell studied the results carefully. "No error, Commander. They achieved 100% civilian evacuation and maintained 82% core integrity. That's a complete success by any standard." The Academy's alert system announced the results to all participants. As the other squads filed back into the main chamber, they looked at Squad Omega with a mixture of confusion and reluctant respect. Vex, the leader of Squad Alpha, approached Olivia. His perfect uniform was now torn and disheveled from the intense simulation. "How?" he asked simply. Olivia looked at her teammates before answering. "We stopped trying to be what we're not. Instead, we built a system around what we actually are." Vex frowned, not understanding. Before he could respond, an announcement came over the speakers. "All squad leaders report to Conference Room A immediately." The Academy Council had called an emergency session. Such a meeting was unprecedented after a training exercise. Olivia followed the other squad leaders, leaving her teammates behind with promises to return soon. In the conference room, the full council awaited. 5 senior instructors, including Commander Harris and Dean Russell, sat at a long table. Their faces were serious. "We have reviewed the performance data from today's quantum breach simulation," the head of the council began. "The results are unexpected." Commander Harris leaned forward. "With respect, Squad Omega's methods violated numerous Academy protocols. Their approach cannot be considered valid. Yet they succeeded where all others failed," countered Dean Russell. "Their performance demonstrates a new paradigm of combat effectiveness, one that values diversity of thought and specialized potential over standardized excellence." The council debated for nearly an hour. Olivia stood silently, listening as her team's future was decided. Finally, the head of the council turned to address the squad leaders. "The purpose of the Academy is to prepare cadets for the realities of space defense," he said. "Today, Squad Omega has shown us that our traditional methods may not be the only path to success." He looked directly at Olivia. "Ms. Benson, the Council has decided to reclassify Squad Omega as an experimental unit with special operational parameters. You will be reassigned to the Academy's Advanced Research Division." The other squad leaders gasped. The Advanced Research Division was typically reserved for senior instructors and elite graduate teams. No first-year squad had ever been assigned there. "Thank you, sir," Olivia said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "What exactly will our duties be?" "Your team has demonstrated an innovative approach to problem-solving," the Council head explained. "You will develop and refine this methodology with the goal of integrating suitable elements into Academy training." When Olivia returned to her teammates and shared the news, they were stunned. "They're moving us out of this dump?" Kyle asked, looking around their rundown dormitory. "To the Advanced Research Wing," Olivia confirmed. "We'll have our own laboratory space and access to the best equipment in the Academy." The next morning, Squad Omega moved into their new quarters. Instead of the cramped, peeling rooms of Complex 12, they now had a spacious laboratory with private sleeping areas and state-of-the-art technology. "I still don't understand," Kyle said as they settled into their new space. "How did you know?" "This would work," Olivia smiled. "Earth is the youngest member of the Coalition. We're considered primitive and underdeveloped. But humans have survived because we recognize patterns others miss and adapt to limitations others can't overcome." "You saw us as we could be, not as we were labeled," Diane said. Everyone turned to look at her in surprise. It was the first time she had spoken aloud in their presence without hesitation. Zachary laughed. "Look at that. Diane's talking now." Diane blushed but didn't look away. "It's easier ... you three. I don't feel judged." In the days that followed, word of Squad Omega's success spread throughout the Academy. Students who had once mocked them now approached with questions. Instructors who had dismissed them now studied their methods. Even Squad Alpha changed their attitude. Vex and his team requested a joint training session, eager to learn from the squad they had once ridiculed. 2 weeks after the simulation, Squad Omega presented their first formal report to the Academy Council. Olivia led the presentation, but each team member contributed in their own way. Diane had prepared detailed analytical slides. Kyle demonstrated modified equipment. Zachary showed new techniques for physical awareness training. When they finished, the council was silent for a long moment. "What you've presented goes against centuries of established military doctrine," Commander Harris finally said. "Yes, sir," Olivia agreed, "but so does the enemy." The quantum breach simulation proved that rigid adherence to traditional tactics fails against adaptive threats. Dean Russell nodded. "I believe what Squad Omega has discovered is a fundamental principle we've overlooked. Effective teams aren't built by forcing diverse individuals to conform to a single standard, but by creating systems that harness their unique capabilities." The council head looked thoughtful. "What would you call this approach, Ms. Benson?" Olivia hadn't considered naming their methodology. She thought for a moment, then answered, "The Adaptive Specialization Protocol." "Very well," the council head said. "You will continue to develop this protocol. If it proves consistently effective, we will begin integrating it into the general curriculum next year." As Squad Omega left the council chamber, they found a crowd of cadets waiting outside. Students from every species and background had gathered to hear the outcome. "Is it true?" one young Arcturian asked. "Are they really changing academy training because of you?" Olivia looked at her teammates before answering. "The academy is evolving, just as we all must. No one succeeds by standing still." In the years that followed, Squad Omega's methodology revolutionized not just the academy but the entire Galactic Coalition military doctrine. Their approach identifying unique capabilities and building flexible systems around them rather than forcing individuals to conform to rigid structures became known throughout the galaxy as the Benson Protocol, and it all began with a human girl who, when pushed to last place, saw opportunity instead of defeat. As Olivia stood at her graduation ceremony 3 years later, watching as her teammates received their honors, she remembered the words of Dean Cora on her first day. Unfortunately, Ms. Benson, you've been assigned to Squad Omega last place. Olivia smiled at the memory. Last place had turned out to be exactly where she needed to be.